Hey, welcome back. Tonight we're going to look at the 7 Years War DBQ, and this is one that students had a little bit of trouble with, and it's understandable. This was a really tough one because within the question itself and within the documents, they never really say French and Indian War, 7 Years War, or it sort of seems scattered all over. So we'll take a look at this one, and I just want to make sure you're clear about it and give you a good chance to understand the process around the DBQ. Hopefully a quick look at this will help you out. So the question is to analyze the connections between regional issues and European struggles for global power in the mid-18th century, and to identify an additional type of document and explain how it would help in your analysis of these components and connections. So they mention additional document over and over again. There's the bullet point, and then it's right in the actual question. They do it every single time. So why do they do that? They want to make sure you're going to do additional document because it's one of the most forgotten elements, and it's kind of strange because why are people not doing that? It's not the most impossible thing to do. So keep in mind that you need to do it. Let's look at the question a little bit clearer here. You're analyzing connections between regional and then European struggles for global power. So there's two facets here. You're looking for some connections between regional and global power in the mid-18th century. So they're giving you hints as to what this question's about. It's about the 7 Years' War. This is a transitionary period where it sets up the next phase of world history, which is when we're looking at the notes and looking at things, chapter 17, Atlantic Revolutions, French Revolution, Haitian Revolution, all those things were important, and they sort of stem right off of what's happening here. Crash Course, and this has been on the website for a long time, but Crash Course has a 7 Years War episode, so I tell you that's probably a good idea to watch that one if you're really still struggling with this or not sure about the 7 Years War. But as John teaches you, it says right down here it lasted 9 years, which is interesting, or maybe 23 depending on how you want to look at it, because this is what Winston Churchill called the First World War, because it is fought in India, in Europe, in the Caribbean, and also in North America. So it is a war that determined the direction of the British Empire and led directly to the American Revolution, because it happens right after this. You look at the dates and you can see it. So this is a painting, this pretty famous depiction of the death of General Wolfe, and it's the Battle of Plains of Abraham. This is in Quebec City, Canada. So that also gives you a little something to think about here. It's Canadian and North American war. And this happened in my backyard where I grew up. I mean, I grew up in the Pittsburgh area. Fort Duquesne, which you'll see in one of these here, is right down there in Pittsburgh. And right over the hill from where I grew up, there was the Battle of Bushy Run, which is like a famous battle from the French and Indian War. British and French were fighting each other, and of course Native Americans were also involved. It's kind of an interesting thing, the French and Indian War, because you can almost think of it as, is it the British fighting the French in India, because they were doing that too. It's interesting that there's two Indias here. Anyway, as you see, there's territorial changes, but in Europe things kind of stayed the same. There was a transfer of colonial possessions between Great Britain, France, and Spain, but there wasn't a big shift. It's not like in Europe, the fight in Europe resulted in big territory shifts in Europe itself. French cedes all of its North American possessions east of the Mississippi River in the island of Grenada to Great Britain. France loses territory in the northern part of India, which they were sort of the British were pushing towards that territory. Spain cedes Florida to Great Britain. France cedes Louisiana west of the Mississippi to Spain, and the 4 neutral Caribbean islands are divided between Britain and France. So, as you'll see in the map here in a second, France doesn't keep very much territory in the Americas, in the eastern part, and in the northern parts. They have a small Caribbean island. Maybe you've heard of that, called Haiti. So 1771, obviously this is pre-American Revolutionary War. So this painting hadn't happened yet, which is General Washington there in the middle. So what is the French and Indian War about? It's basically about the fact that the British colonists and the British government look at land and property very differently from Native Americans. Native Americans kind of use the land and don't put up fences, don't have territorial rights to it necessarily, but it's their land, you know. And the British, when they're there, and their mindset of doing things is to kind of stake claim to the land. And the way the natives were making use of the land didn't seem to be a permanent thing. It seemed more temporary. So there was a mindset difference there. In Europe, you've got the Allies and of Austria, France, Russia, Sweden, Saxony, and Spain. They're all sort of fighting against Great Britain, Prussia, and Portugal. And if you think about it, where Great Britain and Prussia are connected is, you know, later on in World War I, we'll talk about how they're sharing royal family and know of each other. So that's kind of the connection there. And it does show a battle there at Rosebach. And in India, in the lower corner, along the Ganges River, is where there's some battles fighting, and then in Madras below that. So the French lose, obviously. They lose big time in North America because you don't see much green there anymore. There's Haiti, and that's about it. And the Spanish get some territory out of this in the New World. But really the British have much more territory after the French and Indian Wars. And you can see the battles, I'll move it with my mouse here, are all along Quebec, Montreal, and in this territory, which this is Pittsburgh area, is the Ohio River right there that runs to the Mississippi River. Anyway, this gives you another look at it on the left, but there's John pointing out in the American U.S. history series that the 7 Years' War actually not 7 years, more like 9, and in some cases it lasted longer even than that. But the French and Indian War, which was part of the 7 Years' War, was the North American theater. British colonists, British America, and New France kind of facing off against each other, with both sides supported by militia units and their parent countries, Great Britain and France. As we later learn with the French Revolution, you know, the Louis are bankrupting France, and some of it is fighting Britain all over the world, and it's just not going well for them. Later, the French will give money to the Americans to win their independence against the British, and they'll supply troops and support. So this is just some general notes about it. I mean, you don't need to know this to do the DBQ, but just so you understand it, the commercial rivalries in the 7 Years' War. Because it's really about expansion of the British Empire. You can see there in the map on the left side that the British Empire is going to, you know, be a little bit bigger after this. Of course, they're going to lose the American colonies, but be stronger in places like Canada and the Caribbean, India, parts of Africa, and also obviously Australia. So global competition and conflict, and you see some different countries there. I'm not going to read through all these, but this will be online with the presentation as well. But the 7 Years' War, aka French and Indian War, it's really the British versus the French, and you can see that playing out here all the way through this. The Caribbean is one place where it gets a little bit more muddled because it's Spanish and French versus the British, but almost every time the British are kind of standing alone and standing off against these other forces in Europe, which also have colonies and colonial presence. So what's the outcome? The British Empire is the outcome. The British gained control of India, French Canada, North America east of the Mississippi River. They quickly lose that to the Americans, but war paves the way for the 19th century British Empire that rises. So sadly, Mr. Strayer, and this is one thing that I don't like about his book, is this is what he gives you on the 7 Years' War. For much of the 17th and 18th centuries, the British colonies in North America enjoyed a considerable degree of local autonomy as the British government was embroiled in its own international conflicts and various European wars. Furthermore, the British West Indian colonies seemed more profitable and of greater significance to those of North America. True, he's alluding to the 7 Years' War. But in the second edition, because our version doesn't have anything about the 7 Years' War, in the second edition of Strayer, 7 Years' War, it's right in there and it's mentioned and it's pretty clear. Why is that? Well, potentially this question made that happen because the version that we have was prior to 2013 when this DBQ came out. So possible? I don't know, but I know I was looking for it for a while and couldn't find it. So let's talk more about, and we've kind of set the stage here for the fact that we didn't learn a lot about the 7 Years' War as, like, you know, a focus and a point of focus, but it's kind of a transitional thing here between the colonial power of Europe and then who is going to gain the most control, and Great Britain will. So I do think it's very important to learn and understand that this is a pivotal moment for the British Empire. They really grow after this set of battles, and they're fought a lot of different places. But there's the regional look at things, and when you think regional in this question, I interpret that as meaning most of Europe, their home region, and then when you think global, it's going to be much, much wider than that. Let's talk about historical background paragraph, because in this case the historical background paragraph was not a paragraph. Instead it was this map, and a lot of students looked at the map and didn't know what to do with it. Some students looked at the map and called it a document and then worked that into the question, and that's not really going to help them because it's not a document. So what is historical paragraph or historical document paragraph? And it almost always is a paragraph, but go figure. Don't ignore it, but don't use it in your answer. That's probably the best thing for me to say to you is the writers are using it to hint some things to you. They're giving you a gift. They're jogging your memory, valuable hints and suggestions potentially. And why are those elements shown in this situation? Well, all of those places are places where the 7 Years' War was fought, and there were territorial disputes and treaties that were needed and all those sorts of things happening. So all across the globe these things happened in this time period. So if you know your history, you'd understand this was a 7 Years' War. Unfortunately, like, there's nothing here that states that, so a lot of students have trouble like putting it into place. They don't quite understand where this is and what part of history we're talking about. So again, here's the map. I'll let the map fade in here, and that's the 7 Years' War. So if we go back and look at it, these are the 7 Years' War before the outset of the war, and then during the war. When you look at this, does that make sense to you? There is the places that basically the war is occurring, and the places that are impacted, and the countries that are involved. DBU can be on any topic, any time period, any geographical location, and we just never quite know what's going to be asked. It should be pretty intimidating, but it really is it? I mean, I don't know. You don't have to know much history to write it. You're basically taking an approach, you're breaking the documents down and organizing them, and then you're producing an essay with some analysis and point of view and an additional document. The historical background is there to help you. So don't get freaked out by the historical background. I kind of repeated that part in there, but it is pretty important. Let's look at the documents real quickly. So it's document 1. One thing I do when I look at the DBQ is I look at the source. Who is it? what are they saying, and what's this document even? What is the document even? You could even jot it on the side. So what is this? It's substance of a settlement with Mir Jafar. Well, who is that? The Bengali general who defected to the British during the Battle of Plassey. So this gives you an idea of what happened there. Robert Clive is reporting what happened, and there's 6 things there. So I'm going to show you what, I believe Strickland put this together, and so this is his little, he has a quick look at like what the documents are really saying. And so you can kind of read these for yourself, but they give you a sort of a summary of the documents. Let's flip through the rest of this. Now, the first document makes me think of the fact that we've learned quite a lot about the colonial encounters in India under British control. So think back, don't get overwhelmed by these things. Realize we talked about this. We have studied this. And if you're not sure, or you were out of the country during colonial encounters, we'll go back and study it before the AP test. But analyze the connections here between regional issues and European struggles. So every document you're looking, is this a regional issue? Is it a European struggle for global power? So regional or global. And so you're analyzing it, you're trying to find a connection. Maybe it's a certain locations, or maybe there are certain types of documents that could tell you what it was about. The first one was India. So on your paper you're jotting down in your Doc 1, India location and what it was about. Doc 2, you're going to jot down that this is the Indian nations. Now, not India, but Indian nations, and you'd have to understand this is a chief. What gives that away? New York. It's right there in front of it. So what's Doc 2 about? It's a speech of gratitude at the Council of Indian Nations. Okay, let's look at Doc 3. Maria Theresa, Empress of Austria. That's the person who's writing this. It gives you the date too. Sometimes the date can be important. Typically these are in order of date. But our mutual enemy is at full strength because the Russians have withdrawn their forces. So this is sort of a letter updating what's going on. And at the end it says, peace seems further away than ever. I fear that sometime during the coming winter the Prussians will move against our allies the French, and we will not be able to prevent this. So this is Austria, France, and if you remember, they enter into an alliance and a grouping together in the French Revolution that happens next. So Prince Louis, soon to be King Louis, is going to marry Marie Antoinette, and there's some of that kind of hinted to here in the names. There's Maria Antonia, okay, and so some of these names are used over and over again, but if you think about it, that's what's happening here. So the Austrians are going to they're starting this connection with France, and you'll see that play out in the French Revolution. It's the letter to the princess Maria Antonia, expressing her concerns for Prussian aggression. Anxiety, fear, persuasion, those are points of view, things that you could talk about there. So the letter from King Frederick of Prussia to his foreign minister of Prussian army, and this is talking about if the aid of the Ottoman Turks is not forthcoming. I mean, this DBQ is all over the map. I mean, it's like a worldwide DBQ. So let's look at the one on here. This is King Frederick of Prussia, who actually becomes a superb military leader here. That's something I used to teach quite a lot about. Like, he taught marching and military commands. It's the kind of things, if you're in ROTC, you're learning about now. But what's his point of view? A monarch's responsibility to protect, anguish over defeat. And you know, he raises quite an army, but what's happening to him? You know, he's experiencing a series of defeats by the Austrians. Proposed terms of surrender by the French colonists in the Caribbean. So this is giving you basically demand and response between the French colonists and the British Navy, and they're trying to make the best of surrender. So I keep coming back down here to the little asterisk that he has, which if you're reading it, you're going to take the point of view from it, and that's something you should also be kind of jotting down pretty quickly if you can, and organizing it some. That's a layer of analysis. Source 6, document 6. as César de Choiseul, I don't know how to say it, but that's close enough, French Minister of Foreign Affairs, letter to the French ambassador in London. So this is a letter between the French Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is in France, to London, but to a French representative in London. So, and what's this one going to be about? It's the French diplomatic correspondence concerning the loss of trade. So trade is a big part of this DBQ, and the economics are as well. He's angry, frustrated with the British negotiator. This next one comes back to North America. You can see it right away. Pontiac, Chief of Ottawa, addressing the gathering of Ottawa, Huron, all these different Indian groups. They are after the defeat of the French by the British in 1763, so this is near the end of the war. They're talking about addressing the gathering and encouraging a continued resistance to the British trade or alliance. It's very persuasive, anti-British, pro-French, and it's talking about advocacy, doing for each other. Now, interesting thing here is the video that's embedded in the presentation is The Last of the Mohicans. This is the battle scene. It's about 7 minutes long. It does depict kind of the British who were there, and I think in some cases it depicts the French, but definitely these Indian groups. One of the Indian groups, the Huron, is a major part of this, and also we talked about a little bit in one of the looks at world history that we already had earlier on this year. But anyway, good video to watch for extra credit. Very, very interesting, and pretty compelling movie. It did pretty well. So document 8, secret source from a British East India Company employee. So East India Company, where are you thinking that's from? It's India, British East India Company, 1764. This is the report regarding Augustinians in Manila, Philippines, and resistance to British rule. So again, Manila, Philippines, you're talking about Southeast Asia as you're pushing down through there. And this is the 7 Years' War. It's occurred all over the globe. Frustration with Augustinians, anger, betrayal. Source 9, getting towards the end here, the British rep in Turks, 1764. The Turks Island in the Caribbean. So, again, we're back, as these documents go back and forth all across the globe. The motivation here is position and the British imperial gains. So what's the intent of the question? I'm taking this right off the reader notes online, so this will give you a good sense of that. And you can go out there, look at the documents. I'm going to look at a couple passages here and give you a sense of it. The connections between the regional issues and European struggles for global power. It's a question. The wording led some students to group the documents geographically or frame their responses purely European phenomenon. Although a map was given to help the students place the global areas identified in the documents, a historical description of the 7 Years' War may have helped students better understand the context of the documents. That, in a way, that's a missing voice, an additional document about the 7 Years' War that might have been helpful. Why don't they have that? It's possible that there isn't one that really states the 7 Years' War. It's possible that they don't name it the 7 Years' War until later. And I don't really know for sure how that all unfolds, but this is happening in so many different places. It's not like they organize it and say, okay, yeah, this is a world war or a 7 Years' War or 23 Years' War or whatever. But these are all kind of happening at the same time. It gave students ample opportunity to assess point of view, and I think this is a really good one for point of view. And explain the need for an additional document. Obviously, there could have been a need right there. But you've got to keep coming back to struggles for global power and regional issues. So let's look at the first example for the student. First example. We're going to read the first paragraph to you here. And it's sloppy and there's things crossed out. This gets a very high score. I think it's an 8, if I remember correctly, an 8 or 9. In the mid-18th century, various European powers were seeking to spread their influence throughout Europe and the world. However, this expansion of power was not without hindrance. The European powers of this time had to overcome issues including Native alliances in new territory. That's going to be a paragraph topic. The willingness to cooperate economically in terms of trade with other powers. That's going to be a topic sentence of a paragraph in the body paragraph. In a more peaceful approach, okay, this is a different thing here. The European powers had to overcome a diplomatic negotiation and peace agreement in order to expand their powers globally and on the home front, which would be regionally. So I think it's a pretty good paragraph. It's sloppy, it's hard to read, it's pretty simple, but I think it gets right to the point. So does it have an acceptable thesis? Yes. This was shown on the previous slide. So it presents a clear thesis, connection between European struggles for global and regional issues. And it shows native alliances, trade cooperation, diplomatic negotiations, and peace. So those are the groups. And you'll see that right here with the groups. You've got native alliances, that's in red, Doc 2 and 7. You've got 2 chiefs in Native America, so it's Native American alliances. Trade cooperation, it's 6, and 9. So these are British reps in the Caribbean, and the other one is about loss of trade. This is the French minister. So the loss of trade in the British global. So if it's trade, really in both places, they're talking about economic situations. Diplomatic negotiations, that's the one with Maria Theresa, also the one with King Frederick. And peace docs, these are like peace terms and things in Doc 1 and Doc 4, or 5, sorry. So you'll be working these things in here to help understand the question and answer it better. You have to have groups. The groups will help you. So economic stability and prosperity, this is the first body paragraph, and I'm not going to read it all to you, but you can see that the thesis is flowing. This is flowing from the thesis that, and I've underlined a couple spots here, economic stability and prosperity, control or contraband smuggling, and high taxes. So that's what they're talking about there with high taxes and contraband. Document 6, okay, is cited right there, document 6. So be sure to cite the documents. And you can see at the bottom, he's got in Doc 9, okay, and that'll be the next part that he writes. So if your group here, economic stability and prosperity, was 6 and 9, let's see, there's Doc 6, and at the bottom, Doc 9. So that's how you get them grouped. Can you do documents with just 2 groups? Yes, you can. That's not a problem at all. You cannot do a group with just 1 document only. Okay? As my cat is rubbing against the microphone here, you may hear that. But Kitty needs some petting here today, I guess, huh? Is that what you're doing? You need some petting, some attention. So 2, understands the meaning of the documents, and understands all 9 and uses them as evidence. Does the person do that? I believe that he does. Do they support the thesis with appropriate evidence from all but 1? Well, I think they go one better. He probably gets all the points there. Point of view is presented in documents 9, 2, 8, and 7. And they do mention in the reader's note that there's a group that kind of could pull off point of view, and I wouldn't try doing that, but I think they just are showing that he is writing, or she is writing, point of view quite a lot. So let's look at another body paragraph quickly. It says here, however, Andrew Summer, the British rep in the Turk Islands, wants to work with Spain to end smuggling. By effectively ending tariffs on Spanish colonists, the trade would be opened up even further, and the economy as a whole would benefit. Again, an undermined economy prevents true growth and max potential. Also, as the rep for the British Islands, it makes sense that he wants to trade conducted freely. So what is he doing here? He's doing point of view so that it can prosper. He most likely also sees it as an opportunity for the Spanish, swayed by British relations, will open these ports. Perfect. Now the next part, he talks about a good additional document here would be, and I'm not going to get into that part, but you can imagine there might be one that would stem off of this, meaning that it would, flow from this. It could be something about the Spanish responding to this opportunity. Okay, analyze the documents by grouping them. So there's your groups, like we said again. There are 2 successful attempts at additional document in this first sample, and from the perspective of a smuggler, and the other is from a merchant's perspective. The essay was granted an additional point for the expanded core, for point of view, because they did it so much, and for the overall framing of the response with an emphasis on connections. So, and this is up here, I'm not going to read through it here, but how well did students perform overall? They didn't score well overall. The unadjusted mean was a 0 on a score of 9. That means that the mean score was a 2.11 out of possible 9 points. Although many students attempted to answer the question, they were confused by many of the documents and how to connect the documents to either regional or European struggle for power. It's notable that many students chose to answer the question last, and this may imply either that they lack confidence in answering the question or that teachers have encouraged students to answer the DBQ last as a strategy for finishing the exam. And it kind of makes sense, because if you can do the other 2 quicker and score some points, and if you don't think you can do the DBQ well, maybe you would save that for last. We've talked through those strategies a lot already. Common errors: lack of close reading of the documents and lack of understanding or the information about the broader historical context. Core point 1, the thesis. What are you doing, girl? Make an explicit connection between regional issues and European struggles for global power. If you don't do that, you aren't going to get the thesis point. In core point 2, students did not pay attention to the document dates and did not use those dates to help categorize the documents in grouping. And that was kind of an important part of this. We didn't talk about it much here, but if you look back at them, I think you'll see they're kind of in some similar dates potentially. Students who understood the documents generally analyzed the documents in a relationship to either regional or global. However, many still use direct quoting of the documents. And if you notice, the student samples aren't doing that. He's just giving the analysis of what the documents mean, or why they were written, or what the importance is of it. And sure, you're showing understanding of it, but you have to go through analysis as well. Students did attempt to discuss point of view. They still did not successfully provide analysis for the point of view. So vague statements about bias or reliability is not going to get it done. You need to place the documents in groups based on regional or European struggles for global power. The groups need to help you answer the question. Don't just group things to group them. You can't just group them for absolutely no reason. Explicit connections between the documents show grouping. In core point 6, often students didn't explain how the additional document would enhance the understanding of either regional issues or European struggles for global power. So, I mean, again, you just got to keep coming back to the question and making sure your answers, whether it's additional document, whether it is grouping, is fitting the thesis. So you're answering the thesis. Don't just let this sit out there and go, oh, I grouped them. Yeah, I got points for grouping. Did the grouping help you answer the thesis? If it's not, I don't know why you're doing that. You're not going to get a lot of points. So this was question 1. The mean was at 2.11. The standard deviation 1.87. Possible number of points is 9. And they didn't do that well. I do think some of the other choices, if you can look through those, you might have some better luck with them. This was a tough one. I think it's a tough DBQ, and obviously with the score as low as it was, students struggled on this one. And this was a tough year, 2013, for the AP test. The scores were lowest in the history of the test. But hopefully you'll get a sense here that this is something you could do. You could get this done if you put some work into it. Okay? If you have any questions, email me. We'll talk about it some more. We're getting ready for that AP test, so hopefully by the time it's here, you'll be all ready to go. See you next time. Thanks.